Hi everyone, thanks for joining. Can you hear me? Thumbs up.
Perfectly.
Thank you. Nice to see you. I know we haven't started yet, but if you guys don't mind, just turning on your screens so I know you're there, as well as muting yourselves. Hey Edwin, nice to see you. And Troy and Moshe, welcome. Josh, Stillcorp, love the shirt, mate. I didn't bring mine, sorry. Hey Vishal, thanks for joining. Hi Lee. Hi Sam. I think we're going to kick off in about 1 or 2 minutes, guys. So just hold on. Hi Wally. Hi Gurgis. Welcome aboard. I'll just remind you guys, if you don't mind, just turning on your cameras so I know you're there. You don't have to, but I just want to make sure that I'm talking to you and not to a blank screen.
G'day, Ali. This is Jurgis.
Hi, Jurgis. Nice to see you.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for hosting this. Very excited to be here, mate.
Thank you for joining.
Very cool.
We'll start up in about 1 minute, guys. If you don't mind, again, just turning off your microphones, but turning on your screens.
Turning it off now, Ellie.
Thanks, Makun. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Long time no speak. Okay, I think we might start. Thank you, everybody, for joining this afternoon. It's actually taken me a long time to put on this webinar. I've been delaying and procrastinating, but I finally got there before the end of the year. So thank you for your time and for joining. I'm just going to share my screen with you. That's fine, Edwin. You can go. Okay. Okay. Hopefully you can all see my screen. Can someone maybe just unmute just to let me know you can see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
All good.
Thank you.
So, yes, I can see it. It's there.
Perfect.
All good.
So welcome everybody.
You don't have, I'm sorry, Ellie, you don't have the full screen. We can see your note on the right side. You need to expand that.
Thank you. I've got a few screens going on here. Is that one better?
Perfect, perfect.
Yep, that's good.
Thank you everybody for the feedback. All right, so let's get cracking because I know this is your lunch break and you're dying to get back to work. So today we're going to be dealing with 10 commandments for dealing with councils and my predictions for what's going to happen for 2023. So just some, the overview. Yeah, so we're going to cover my predictions for what I think is going to happen over the next 12 months in councils and DAs, as well as I'm going to touch upon the Land Environment Court, what's been happening and what I think is going to happen in the Land Environment Court, as well as my 10 commandments for dealing with councils. And we're going to end off with some questions and answers. Just first off, some housekeeping, as I was saying before, if you don't mind just turning on your cameras so I know you're there, and just muting your microphone. There is an opportunity to ask some questions in the chat box. I will, though, and try and answer those later on, but there'll also be an opportunity later on to have some questions from everybody here, and I'll try to answer them to the best of my abilities. And okay, so Navon Planning, for those that don't know us, we've been around for about 8 years, and we specialise in small to medium residential projects across Sydney, and also providing property advice to clients. I have a nimble team. There's five of us. I've even got someone working for me in New Zealand. So we're a nimble team, but we're quick and efficient. Some of you might know that I'm a numbers person. I like to keep track on our success rate. So far this year, we've had actually 65 DAs approved, which is a record since we've been operating, as well as we have been involved with at least 29 councils, with at least 241 projects. So that's enough about Navon Planning. So my predictions for 2023, I thought it'd be a good opportunity, being end of November, just to share with you my thoughts for what I think is going to happen next year. So I think, unfortunately, DAs are going to actually continue to get longer, and I know it's going to be frustrating. I think also there's going to be a lot more court appeals. So what that is going to mean is the Land Environment Court is going to have to bring on even more assistant or acting commissioners to cope with the volume of the appeals. That's something that the court actually was quite proactive in doing over the last 2 years or so during COVID, where they brought on more commissioners to manage their caseload. Something similar to the bushfires that occurred in Victoria some time ago. I think there's going to be an inquiry into the flood-prone sites in regional New South Wales. Now, that's probably going to take the focus off the state government for quite a while, but I don't think it's really going to affect the volume or the workload for councils. One of the things that obviously people notice, and it's very real, it's on the headlines almost every day in the news, is that interest rates are increasing. So, you know, your mum and dad wanting to buy a new home, they're growing their family, whatever the case may be, they might prefer just to stay where they are and either renovate their home or build their dream home instead. I think that's going to be very real, which means more work for all of us, hopefully. Another thing that has been happening for quite a while and is going to get worse is staff shortages within councils. So I'm not just talking about the council officers, the DA and the town planners. I'm mainly talking about the engineers. I don't know about you, but a lot of my DAs are being held up by the traffic engineers or the stormwater engineers, to the point that I was talking to a council manager on Monday, and he was telling me they're struggling to find engineers, qualified engineers, to help with their backlog of work. And that's a real serious problem. While the DAs might be ticking the boxes in all other aspects, it's engineering that I'm finding that is holding DAs up. Also, council officers are human beings, believe it or not. I used to be one many years ago, and I think they're going to burn out and even have possibly mental health issues. It's a really serious business, I think. I was talking to a junior town planner at Hillshire Council last week, and we have a simple swimming pool DA for a client. It's not a big deal, but it's been in there for a few months. So the client naturally wants to know what's going on. So I called the planner, and he seems very, on edge. And he said, I'm sorry, I've got 41 DAs on my desk, and your DA is number 19 on my desk. So and he just has to go through the DAs in front of ours. And he did say, and we're hiring some new town planners because some have left. But this is also in the back of the minds of the council officers that we're dealing with on a daily basis. And what's apart from that being, I think, a huge problem, it's probably going to lead to rash and quick decisions and probably poor planning and design outcomes. And it would obviously lead to more refusals. I've got here a little screenshot of an ad that the Department of Planning put on a few months ago. I don't know if you can read it, but it's basically an entry-level planning officer job for the Independent Planning Commission. And you can see they've highlighted it's starting at $101,000, which is obviously very attractive for someone who doesn't have much experience in councils or state government. So what's happening too is a lot of junior graduate town planners are being gobbled up by the state government with their attractive salaries, which is making it harder, I think, for councils to keep up. So the last prediction I think will happen in the next 12 months is we all know we've got state elections coming up. Labor has obviously caught us by surprise in the federal elections. But what is going to happen in the state elections over here in New South Wales, I don't know. I prefer things to keep this, the way they are, but this is not a political discussion or debate. But I will suggest this to anyone that is listening. If you're a member of any property organisation or institute like the Planning Institute of Australia or the UDIA, I think you should really stand up and shake the trees to call for some change. It's something I've been talking to some of my colleagues also recently, that from a council point of view, there's not really change that's happening dramatically. Whereas if you look on LinkedIn, which I'm very active on, you see David Chandler, the building commissioner, is all over the place, taking photos of buildings that are falling down. I honestly think you need someone like that, a planning commissioner that's going to take the lead and that's going to help councils through this transition process. I think that's the only real way to speed things up and streamline the DA system, which is, as you all know, it's getting really clogged up at the moment. So I'll just touch upon, I've just got 2 slides for you all about the Land Environment Court. Hopefully hopefully not many of you go to court, but it's something that often you do have to do sometimes. I was there on Monday. Thankfully, it's my last court case for the year. But sometimes you do have to take your clients to court because, primarily because council's taking too long to assess your DA. So some of the points here that I suggest you do is you can try, before you decide to take the DA to court, you might want to first understand what council's issues are. So primarily through receiving an RFI, letter request for additional information, before you pull the trigger and take it to court. Some clients, however, will ask you to just wait the 42 days and just submit the appeal automatically. I, for one, prefer to try keep DAs out of court to save clients, money, so that they can use that money on their home renovation or their block of apartments. Well, what I would suggest also you do is to try bank an approval through council or through court, and then you can go later and modify it through a section 4.55, which gives you the ability to make changes to your approval. You should obviously have a quality team of experts in your pocket, as well as speak to an expert planning solicitor. You don't always need to, I think, you don't always need to go to a barrister for land environment court work. Often you can find a planning solicitor who can do most things. For those people that are still joining, if you don't mind just turning on your screens so I can see you, if you don't mind, and also just keeping your microphone off. Thank you. Also some other considerations too. And try not to get a deferred commencement on your DA, because especially easements, because those are often hard to resolve, which might lead you to have to take your neighbour to court. And the last slide for this is just some stats of the Land Environment Court. So this is from the annual review of 2021 from the court. I've only just shared with you the statistics for Class 1. So Class 1 appeals is your regular DAs that most of us are involved with. Now you can see between 2017 and 2021, I don't know if you can see here, there's been a bit of a drop in terms of the registrations of appeals, but there's also been quite a consistent drop in the number of applications pending. So for me, and you can see that here in figure 5.1, you can see, so to me that means more appeals are coming through, but they're being finalised quicker, which is really good. So well done to the court for helping appeals go through a lot quicker. You've also got figures there about pre-trial disposals. That's where the appeal presumably doesn't go to a hearing, and it's all agreed to in mediation. So that's very high, which is good. Whereas only probably 655, for example, in 2021 where appeals were agreed to, whereas 306 went to a full hearing, which is not always fun going to a hearing. But what these statistics are really showing you is that the court is overwhelmed with work, majority of the time because councils are very slow. And as I said before in my predictions for next year, I think the court is going to have to bring on more acting commissioners to cope with the volume of appeals, and that way things are going to run a lot smoother for everybody. I did read something recently. A solicitor sent me his thoughts on a white paper that he prepared. I'm not going to share his name here, but he prepared a white paper on on the benefits for going to court. And I do agree with him. There are a lot of benefits for going to court, especially with larger projects. But for your mum and dad just trying to do their home renovation, or it might be a childcare centre that you want to get approved. So, on the flip side, you might want to take something like that to court, because you will, as you can see here, most court cases, I would say, get get approved through mediation. So if you haven't yet considered it, possibly consider going to court on your next DA. All right, so time for the juicy part, 10 commandments for dealing with councils. So I don't want this to be a council bashing session, really, because we all have to, negotiate with councils on a daily basis. But just like what Harry Triguboff said recently in the interview, he sees, he says he has friends, his partners. He likes his partners. Who are his partners? The bank and councils. In some respects, I agree with them. Councils have to be our partners in all of this. It's not us. It shouldn't be an us versus them mentality. It should be us working together to be able to, get a quality design outcome for, not just the client, but also for the area. So I'll take you through this. once again, if you have any questions, feel free just to type them up in the chat box, and I can respond to them later, as well as there'll be some time after this webinar just to, if you've got any questions, just unmute yourself and we'll chat later about it. So number one, the first commandment is, thou shalt not piss off, cancel. Naveen raised his hand.
Hi, Elia. I've got a quick question, if I may ask.
Yeah, sure, go for it.
At what stage do you think that we need to involve, solicitors from an environmental planning code perspective, just as a guideline or as a best practice to?
Okay, I'll answer this question quickly, and then I'll answer other questions later. I think it really depends. If your project complies fully, for example, it shouldn't really go to court, I don't think. But if you're pushing a few things for floor space or height, and there's going to be, let's say, objections from the neighbours, then it might be a good decision or strategy to take a project like that to court. That's what I would do if I was you. Remember also, just talking about court, you have, if I'm not correct, once the application is submitted, you have 6 months to appeal it. It used to be 12 months with COVID, but it's gone down back to 6 months. So if your DA is in there for 7 months, for example, you're going to miss your deemed refusal period. So your DA will have to sit there until council makes a decision. But let's dive back into these 10 commandments. So thou shalt not piss off council. And I think you all know why. Because it's the next 9 commandments are going to tell you why you shouldn't piss off council. So if anyone, I think some people's microphones might still be on, so if you don't mind just muting them. So commandment number 2, be patient and give your clients realistic expectations. So what do I mean by this? As I said, councils are the decision makers, and I like to often call them, they're the umpires in all of this. It shouldn't really be an us versus them mentality, but at the end of the day, they're the ones making the decision whether your client's development or your even personal development is going to be approved or not. What I advise my clients too is you can't guarantee council is going to approve it, even if it's a compliant DA. There's absolutely no guarantee they're going to approve it. Unfortunately, we're in the business here of DAs and not CDCs, not complying developments, which obviously are a ticker box exercise and has to 100% comply. There is a degree of flexibility in DAs, and I believe you can be creative with DAs too, even with DAs which are over the floor space or over the height, for example. So I suggest to clients, I don't tell them it's going to be approved in 3 months. I tell them it might be approved in 6 months. That way, when it comes 3 months and 1 day, I'm not getting harassed by clients saying, Ellie, where's my DA? It's been 3 months. So generally I tell people, a little bit longer, 3 months, 6 months, might be 12 months for a house. It took 51 weeks for us to get a DA approved for a house. In one particular council. So the DAs take as long as they need to. And one of the things I recommend you do too is to let your clients know what things are going to lead to delays of your DA. So for example, you might be missing some reports. That's going to lead to a delay. You might have objections. You might have 1 objection or 100 objections. It's all going to lead to delays. It's really important that you let your clients know that the DA is going to take time. What I'm hearing also lately is the planning portal. The planning portal is basically, for those that don't know, it's council's clearing section. It's their quality control process, in other words. So in the old days, we used to go up to the front counter and lodge your plans and reports to council, and they used to accept payment and it's formally lodged. For the last few years now, you have to upload your documents to something called the planning portal, The council checks it. If everything's there, then they send you an invoice. You or your client pays the invoice, and only then your application is formally lodged. But I guess it takes two to tango with the planning portal, really. Often, I don't know about you, but my DAs come back asking for different things. You know, one example recently someone told me was that their DA was rejected at the planning portal because they didn't show an RL on the pool coping. Now that's, you know, I think the person that told me that it is on this Zoom webinar. It's just ridiculous. Whereas, you know, someone told me also recently, Georges River is apparently taking up to 6 weeks to lodge your DA once you put it on the portal to once they check it. It's very frustrating. So again, you have to tell your clients, this is the process. You know, you don't just lodge your DA and that's it. It's actually, it can take a few weeks actually to formally lodge your DA. And what the last point here, I suggest, you know, what you should tell your clients also is usually you'll get at least one opportunity to talk to council about your DA. I have had DAs refused without any communication, which does happen, but you want to try avoid that. And also obviously expect to receive an RFI, as I was saying before, which is a request for additional information letter. But I like to call it basically a shopping list. It's a shopping list of all the issues. Usually as planners, we try reduce the number of issues. There might be 10 questions or issues the council asks. But we try to reduce them to, you know, a handful so that we can address them easily. Commandment number 3, you should check for any objections. Now this is quite important because you know, your clients, they might be mum and dad or a developer. They might not know that their neighbours are going to object or not. It might be a fully compliant design, but yet you're going to be blocking someone's views of the Centrepoint Tower, the Harbour Bridge. You don't know. But obviously you can predict that some people might object, but once the DA is lodged, you always have to check if there's any objections. So the reasons why you need to check is mainly because if there's 10 or more objections for your DA, it's going to be triggered up to the planning panel. So what that means is it's going to take longer to get assessed, basically. What I also recommend you do is before you lodge the DA, maybe you just go over to the neighbours. If you're an architect, always go with your clients to the neighbours, show them the plans before you lodge. Even though the neighbours might not be happy with it, at least you've done the right thing and there's a courtesy. Because what I tell people is, you know, especially after they receive a lot of objections to their DAs, you can't really choose your neighbours, can you? Because you don't know what they're going to do. They might love your DA, or they might hate it for silly reasons. So it's very important that you have your neighbours on board. Now, one example I'll share with you, also another architect I'm working with is involved in this particular project. We put in a modification to an approved hotel in Newcastle. The changes were really related to BCA, accessibility, car parking. So we weren't really changing much of the approved building. It was just really cosmetic changes and internal with a new fire stairs and things like that. Not a very big DA, to be honest. But this is a hotel with a few hundred rooms. You know, in Newcastle and near the water, and we lodged the application not knowing, you know, thinking it's quite straightforward. What happened was we got 34 objections from the neighbours. Some of them were saying things like, you know, I bought this property before, you know, nobody told me there was an approved hotel here. And things like that. So people were arguing about, you know, traffic and height and bulk, heritage, all these issues, which were basically irrelevant because the hotel's already been approved. So you never know what's going to happen with your DA and the number of objections that you're going to receive. So in this particular application, it has to go to a special process in a panel, in a public committee. Up in Newcastle, it's a very special process because it's hit the trigger of 25 or more objections. Amendment number 4. Contact, now this is the fun one, contact the DA office every 3 to 4 weeks for an update on your DA. I did say previously in other seminars and webinars, every 2 to 3 weeks, but because of what's going on at the moment, maybe possibly leave it to 3 to 4, every 3 to 4 weeks. So an architect I was talking to recently said to me, why wait 3 to 4 weeks? You wait 3 to 4 months. Sometimes you have to wait 3 to 4 months before you actually get an answer or a reply to your emails. And what I suggest people do is be gentle and don't be too pushy with council. Like this town planner. So what I've shared with you is a screenshot of a Facebook post by somebody. I'm not going to mention his name. I've tried to block it out there. But he's put, I don't know if you can see that on your screens, but he's put there a post to a property networking group on Facebook saying, hey guys, I had a council town plan on one of the projects who was particularly slow. I was applying pressure via email every week. So he's saying, this is an extract of the email that his town planner sent to council. Now that's here on the right. It's a bit blurry, but this is what was put on Facebook. So he, if you can read the email, it's very abrupt. It's not nice. He's saying things like, if I had a DA for 12 months, then I would be held accountable. We do not cut corners. We simply had confidence in our decision-making. They backed our team. This guy, whoever this planner is, I certainly wouldn't recommend anybody hire him. It's just terrible what he's written to this. And then he writes at the end, God help us when he leaves. Very, very rude and abrupt. I don't know which town planner this is, but the next thing is even more hilarious. Some people commented on this guy's post on Facebook. There's actually one person here who's familiar, who might actually be on this Zoom webinar. I'm not sure, but a lady called Minu Samadhi. She wrote, hello, that's exactly what we do as well. Chase and letter from myself and the town planner. I also noticed putting the dollar amount for every day delay would help as they face the reality. There's a few comments here, which is, I guess, what other people do. Everyone, I guess, has their strategy and their mannerisms in how they deal with councils. It's a matter of really, councils are under the pump. I don't feel sorry for them, but at the same time, as I was alluding to before, they are human beings, and they do, and I think they're going to, when push comes to shove, there's going to be real mental health issues with these council officers, and it's a problem. So someone called Nolan Keenan, I don't know if you can see here, they wrote, good reminder, it's important to maintain professionalism, but always keep the pressure on. The squeaky wheel gets the most oil. So you have to be professional. We're all professionals here, and we need to treat councils with respect. Sometimes you have to bite your tongue, but still, we're all professional in all of this. This was actually an email from Sutherland Council that was sent to me, as well as many other people, with DAs in council. So it's, as you can see, it's a standard email. I don't know if you can read it, but I've highlighted some interesting bits. So basically, Sutherland Council was one particular council that was very slow with, because they lost a lot of staff, like most councils. So we had a DA that was lodged in April, and by this email was sent in July, we still hadn't, the DA wasn't notified yet. I think it got only notified in August. So it took about 4 months for council just to notify the DA, as well as to allocate it to a council officer. Now, usually once you lodge your DA, it takes a few weeks for it to be allocated and notified. Not even a few weeks, it should happen quicker. But this email is basically council, they're trying to explain what happened and why COVID, given the current resource shortage, time constraint, and recent ministerial direction to reduce timeframes made by the Minister for Planning, applicants will be given a maximum of one opportunity only to amend the application, etc. But one of the interesting things here they write in the middle is, I've written here, I've highlighted here, Every application has a nominated applicant, and it is the individual that council is required to communicate with, which is true. It then says it is the applicant's responsibility to keep their client updated. Please refrain from frequent contact of your assessing officer, as this impacts on process and delays the assessment of applications. Now, that's very true. Yeah, we need to be mindful that we can't badger councils and email them every day and call them every day. So commandment number 5, after receiving a letter for requested information or changes, organise a Zoom meeting or call with council to discuss. That's quite obvious. When you get that shopping list of issues from council with all their issues and extra documents they require, sometimes, you know, some things can be written in a way that you don't understand, or you can interpret it one way, your architect can interpret it another way, and council can interpret it another way. And well, often the way to do it is to work with council and email them or pick up the phone to say, hey, can we have a meeting, Zoom meeting, just to go through these issues. 9 times out of 10, from my experience, council officers will agree to have a Zoom meeting with you or to have a phone call. It's really important, because the last thing you want to do is start amending your plans because council says so, and then you submit and council says, no, we didn't ask you to do that. We wanted you to do this. It's really critical to engage with council after they send you this letter, as well as obviously you usually would ask for an extension of time, because they often give you a letter saying you've got 14 days to respond. Again, 9 times out of 10, they'll tell you, yes, you can get an extension. So again, going back to what I was saying before, that, you know, working with councils, it's a partnership. It's not an us versus them arrangement. Number 6, check how the DA will be determined. For example, it'll either be delegated or a planning panel. Now, it's pretty, you know, I was alluding to this before also. If you check the number of objections of your DA, for example, and there's 10 or more, what that means, it's going to go to the planning panel, which means the DA is going to take much longer to get approved or determined. Whereas if the DA fully complies with FSR and height, there's 1 or 2 objections maybe, it can very well be determined by something called delegated authority. I would say probably 95% of DAs are approved under delegated authority, which means just the town planners and the managers, they make the decision on your DA. And it's important to understand which way it's going to go, because that will ultimately affect not just the timing, but, you know, what to expect in your application. If your application needs to go to a planning panel, that it's quite a serious thing, I think. For those that don't know what a planning panel is, it was set up, I think, 4 or 5 years ago to take the powers off councillors for assessing for determining DAs. So the planning panel essentially is comprised by 4 members. So there are 3 members who are professionals, so they can be architects, town planners, urban designers, and planning solicitors. And the 4th member is a community representative, usually also with some knowledge of councils and planning and building. And the panel, they ultimately make the decision on your application. Again, back to what happens at a panel meeting or a planning panel. Usually the town planner assessing your DA will write up a report which gives a recommendation. So the recommendation can either be for obviously approval or refusal, and then they take that up to the planning panel. And more often than not, the planning panel tend to agree with the recommendation, but I have seen before where the panel have, for example, refused a DA, even though the council officer recommended approval. So it's really, to sum up, it's really important to understand how is your DA going to be assessed by council. So number 7, this is very critical also. I think all of these 10 commandments are important. And we can talk about each of them for hours and hours, but we don't have that much time today. So number 7, don't let your clients contact the councils, and ensure there's only one point of contact from your team. This is particularly important, as I was saying before, because every DA officer is very, very busy. For example, they might be assessing 30 DAs at any one time, I've spoken to planners that are assessing 41, 46 DAs. It's a lot. And when I used to work in councils, the average, the number of DAs that were comfortable to work with was around 20 or 30. I think 30 was kind of the maximum, which was really overworked. It's important, either you as the architect or developer or the town planner, to be the only one person calling council or emailing council. The last point here is just reminded me of a story. When I was working at a particular council in Sydney, I overheard one of my colleagues, another council officer, town planner, he slammed down the phone and in a rage. And I said to him, "What happened? Why did you slam down the phone?" He said, "This particular applicant calls me every single day for an update on his DA, and I'll never answer his phone call again." Obviously that's not good customer service, but on the flip side, this applicant shouldn't be bothering this council officer every day or every week. It should, as I was saying, the other commandment, every 3 to 4 weeks is probably a good round number when to get an update from council. So number 8, this is a strategy which I find can really help and it can really speed up your DA. Sometimes council might be at the last minute or at the beginning, they might say, these are all the issues, but, just throw on some privacy screens or things like that and send us the amended plans. What I say is, what you could propose to council is, why don't we accept these design changes, but do you mind just throwing it in as a DA condition? So in other words, you can still get your DA approval subject to these design changes. What I will suggest though is just make sure that these changes are minor, like a privacy screen, windows or driveway, things like that, not like knocking off another level of your house or knocking off one apartment from your block of apartments. It should really be a small change. The other thing is, even if it's a small change, you have to make, or a design change, you need to make sure that it's actually achievable. So it might be a condition about stormwater. Before your DA gets approved, check with your stormwater engineer. Hey, is this stormwater condition going to work or not? Or your architect or building designer, can we actually achieve and address this condition or not? It's pretty important. Otherwise, you won't get your construction certificate approved. And the other tip, and it's a big tip, is you should always try avoid getting a deferred commencement. So for those that don't know what a deferred commencement is, it's where council approves your DA in principle, subject to you providing all this information. So it might be, for example, it could be let's say a childcare centre that's approved in an industrial site. So council will ask you need to provide a contamination report before they'll issue the actual approval. Or a standard deferred commencement that I see is an easement. You need to get an easement through your neighbour for stormwater. So the reason I suggest you try avoid that is, while you might have an approval in hand, it's actually not a real approval. You have to activate the DA. You have to achieve or address that deferred commencement before your DA will actually be stamped and approved. And again, it might be an easement through your neighbour, but your neighbour is never ever going to give you an easement through their property for stormwater. In other words, your DA is invalid. You're never going to be able to build, what you want to build. That's really important to try get all when you get your DA approval, make sure everything is in there and also that in the conditions that they can be achieved also. So number 9, we're almost there. Only escalate the DA if absolutely necessary. Please don't burn bridges with council. You might ask why? Why shouldn't you burn bridges? Because again, we're all partners in this, as well as council officers are going to be working in council for many, many years. Just like if you're a designer, an engineer, a developer, or even a real estate agent, the council officers are not going anywhere, usually. So you don't want to piss them off, really. You don't want to. I had a case many, many years ago where I had a DA with a building designer in a particular council. And sometime after we lodged, he calls me and says, Ellie, can you please deal with this council officer? And I said, why? He said, oh, because in our last DA, we had a blue, she pissed me off and I don't want to talk to her. And I said to him, you can't do that. You can't burn bridges. Now, luckily, I don't work with that building designer anymore because, we just didn't see eye to eye. But you can't do that. You can't be, as I was saying before, sometimes you got to bite your tongue and, not say something just to try, get your DA approved. Obviously, I don't expect you to cave in on things that are not reasonable. You need to be able to work with council because they might be there for 10, 20 years. And hey, your next DA might be allocated to that same council officer. And what's been happening lately, especially with all these delays and staffing issues that councils are experiencing, some of my clients are personally calling their local councillors or even emailing the general manager of council. I had one client recently who sent me an email to say, Ellie, I'm sending this email. No, he asked me, sorry, it's an email to the general manager of a particular council. And he said, should it come from me or from him? And I said, it's better if it coming from you. So we weren't getting a response from the council officer. So he decided to write this email to the GM, which is fair enough. Within a day of sending the email, the council officer calls my client and apologizes and gives an update. So sometimes you need to do that, unfortunately, to get an answer out of the council or just a simple update. I don't recommend this, but it's something you can very well suggest to your clients is you can lodge a formal complaint to council to say, hey, my DA's been in for 6 months. I haven't heard anything. You can do that. I honestly, I don't know how else you can get a meaningful update without sometimes complaining. Again, I don't suggest you do it as a consultant or a professional. Perhaps your client can do it. It's better if they do it than you, I think. And the last point I suggest here is as a consultant, you should never communicate with councillors. That's something that I've never done ever in my career. Because obviously that can be seen as lobbying. Even though councillors don't really make decisions these days on DAs, it's something, you should obviously distance yourself. So these comments were made to me by a planning officer, a team leader at a particular council in Western Sydney. We hadn't had traction on our DA for a good few months. And I picked up the phone to the team leader and she told me, your planning officer, they're the quickest of the whole bunch. And I said, okay, fine, that's good to know. And then they said, I wrote this down because it was quite a funny statement. They said, this was for a childcare centre, mind you. They said, it takes a long time to review the controls for childcare centres because the SEP is very long. Now, I think we didn't get an answer for at least 4 or 5 months. So it doesn't take that long to go through the SEP. I don't know about you, but I know the SEP pretty well for childcare centres, and it's long, but doesn't take it that long. From my experience working in councils, if you have all the information you have with you, the referrals, the right documents, plans, reports, you can generally assess a DA within 1 day. Within 1 day, if you've got everything together, the DA can be, off your desk in 1 day. But that's for another story. The last but not least, the last commandment is what? If council's still pissing you off, refer to commandment number 1, which is what? They shall not piss off council. Here's just a summary of all the commandments for you. If you like, after this webinar, I can send you the presentation. Just message me on LinkedIn or email me. And that's about it for now, guys. Thank you very much for listening in. I'll just quickly go through the chat channel to see if there's any questions there. And then if you want to ask questions, just unmute yourself and so someone right here, Victor, I don't know if you're still on there. Victor, you said I might just switch off this. presentation. There we go. Where was Victor? Let me just see. Victor says, how do we deal with huge assessment delays at council? I have submitted a class 1 DA 7 months ago and only last week received council's RFIs and a request for planning changes. So Victor sent this at about 12:21 on the chat box. I think hopefully I answered that question in those tips. Often, yeah, you have to escalate it if you're not getting any traction. I don't like escalating DAs to the managers. It's not nice, but sometimes you do. Edwin said, okay, thanks, Edwin. I think he's left. Irina said, thanks. How many staff do you have? As I said, Irina, I've got 4 staff, 4 town planners working for me. And Joe Yusuf says, big thank you, Ellie will speak shortly. So Naveen, you put your hand up. You had a question?
Yeah, Ellie, a quick question. Well, when you're going for a DA, you definitely need, consultants, like different consultants. It could be arborist, engineers and other stuff. How important is it to have somebody worked in that council for you? I mean, when you're going for a DA, is that something of a very big material importance, or what is your experience being there?
So someone who worked for council?
Some meaning like, who has worked or who has put a DA in that particular council. Let's say,
sure. Gotcha.
If I'm applying for a DA in Hills Council, how important is my team or the consultants, whom I'm engaging or whom I'm working with? How important is for me to make sure that have they submitted any DAs there or not? Or is that not a very big important thing, or how do you look at that?
I would say it's important as well as it's not important. Having local knowledge of the council controls and an idea of what's been approved and refused in the area is very important, because you need to understand how much can you push with councils. But at the same time, I've had projects in regional New South Wales where I've never set foot in that council or that area. And what I do is I apply the same strategies. If it's a DA in Bondi or Blacktown, I apply the same strategies, and with the right team, obviously. But on the flip side, if you've got a project where you've got an architect from Melbourne designing something here in Sydney, it makes things very complicated, because obviously it's a different system down there. But I would recommend, yeah, sure. I haven't worked in every council in Sydney or New South Wales, mind you, but if you've had, certainly, yeah, and it helps too, getting an architect or a building designer with local knowledge, that'll help also. Hope that helps.
Yeah, thanks.
Hi, Ali.
Yes, who's next?
Hi, Ali. My name is Vishal. Quick question. Ali, why do you think there are going to be more DA lodged? You mentioned that at the beginning of your presentation. Considering there's obviously the interest rate is now higher, people are finding it more, harder to fund the project. Why do you think that would be the case?
Well, even though building costs are always obviously are rising much more every single minute. Now people need to live somewhere, and that there's plenty of land in Sydney that's being underutilized. The Northwest growth centres, for example, the government has unlocked those areas, but mainly I'm talking about within the Sydney metro area, where mums and dads, for example, or developers, well, let's say, for example, mums and dads want to, having a new kid and they're in a 2-bedroom house somewhere, living somewhere, they want to add another level, for example, either add another level or they have to sell and buy a new place. Chances are it'll be difficult for them to buy somewhere else. So that's why I'm predicting, just like with COVID, there was a huge volume of DAs that were submitted in councils, that they're still struggling even till today to cope with that volume of work. I think there's going to be a real, and it's good for builders, it's good for developers to be able to be involved with these things.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Just one more question.
Yeah.
Coming back to statistics, you did mention the courts are resolving the issues more, quickly than what they used to. Do you think part of the reason is because people are choosing to go more CDC than DA? So the numbers, so the volume of applications have gone down, so they have less work.
Well, yeah, good point. I didn't mention that. The intention of CDCs was to offload the work from councils. I haven't seen that happen yet. I don't know if anybody can say that. The appeals, yeah, the courts approving things a lot quicker. Mainly, I didn't mention it, but mainly because there's strict timeframes if you lodge an appeal in court. For example, if you have to get something is due for court, it has to be done there and then. It can't be a day later. Whereas if you keep your DA in council, it can sit in there for 6 months, 12 months with nobody looking at it. So with court, there is certainly an advantage because councils that are going to be stuck to the court's timeframes rather than their own. Hope that answers that one. I've got Hussein Bazi.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Hussein Bazi just put in a message. I'll read it out. This is a common occurrence. Subjective. Okay, hold on. People are still messaging. He said, I received an RFI stating that the height bulk of the proposal. These issues were not raised earlier. Your thoughts? These issues were not raised by council.
Sorry, this is my question.
Yeah.
So,
this is your. Sorry, better go back. There's a lot of questions here. Sorry.
This is.
Yeah, maybe just ask the question. Yeah, it's probably easier.
I was responding to Yi. Problem is with what he's saying is there are very sort of subjective opinions from council officers with no grounds other than it being subjective.
Yeah.
So what
I
are your
see the comment? Yeah.
Yeah.
The FSR landscaping and setbacks complied. Council still says the density is high. So, what type of development was that? It wasn't for a house, was it?
It's a townhouse.
Okay. So it could very well be let's say there's too many townhouses on that site compared to everywhere else, possibly. As I said at the beginning, even though DA can comply, there's no guarantee you'll get approved. Perhaps one suggestion is if it's for townhouses, you might want to remove, let's say, one townhouse and make another one bigger, so you get more bedrooms in a townhouse. That might be something you could consider doing to increase to reduce the yield, reduce the number of townhouses, but make them a little bit bigger.
Yes, this is the council's require. So I did remove one unit.
Okay.
And also council says the indentation, the building indentation is not enough. So it's 500. So they're asking for increase. So such kind of thing is not in the DA. So
yeah.
So what can I do?
You can message me after this if you want, and I can chat with you offline. Councils can ask for these things, and as you said, it's really these things can be 100% subjective. Perhaps they've done a similar thing with the DA down the road. I don't know. Or your DA might be the first one in that street with such a high density, according to them. So it's 100% subjective. It seems like you've already taken my advice on board to reduce the yield or make the townhouses bigger. Maybe, yeah. We can talk offline if you want.
Okay, thank you.
But good question. Vishal Sharma asked a question, why do you think there is going to be more DA logged in the future? I think we answered that. Let me see. Someone says 42 days. Yeah, 42 days is the days in which you can take a DA to court. Were there any other questions?
Hey, Ellie, one quick question, if I may ask.
Sure.
Well, actually, I'm working with one of the places of worship, in North Sydney Council. Basically, we are looking to, we are at a very preliminary stage in our discussion to, knock down and build a temple. Basically, it's a temple. So now my question is is there any choice for us, rather than choosing the application being submitted to North Sydney Council, is there a way that we can directly go to the planning, NSW planning? Is there a choice for us to make, or I mean, how does that work, or is it only that we have to go to council only, or how do we look at that?
It depends on the threshold in terms of the cost of work. I think if it's at $10 or $20 million, it goes to state government.
Okay, so it's basically roughly around 12 to 13 million built. So which means that it will go directly to the state government. It's not being looked by the council, or
I'd have to come back to you again. If you find me, after this, I can look it up for you. But there is a threshold.
Perfect, Ellie. Thank you. That helps. Yeah.
Gurgis, do you want to maybe pop on, maybe just ask the question instead of on the chat? It's probably easier.
Yeah. Hi. I've got one question. Mine is in relation to different building type. I know we've talked a lot about housing. It's more around the schools. I just wanted to get your thoughts in terms of whether you've got any suggestions or strategies on how to deal with council regarding DCP parking requirements.
Okay, for a school?
Yes.
Well, the school, there's no real controls for schools, are there? Like, as far as council's controls are concerned. But there are, from memory, there's a state policy for education, whatever it's called now.
The ESEP.
Where you can do stuff under a CDC. It depends on what you're doing, really.
Yes, my question is around where we have, we usually have a lot of constraints around parking in terms of the building, especially for upgrades, where there is a specific number of car parking requirements to be provided, but because of the upgrade that's happening, sometimes it's not easy to meet those. So the DA allows us to be flexible or creative with that.
Yeah.
But, with council around how to get that to work. So I'm just asking if there are, some strategies in terms of dealing with council around those sort of issues.
Is the school in a new release area, or is it in Sydney metro area?
Sydney, Sydney and Wollongong, just schools in general.
Yeah, Wollongong. Okay. Well, I haven't done much with schools, to be honest. I've done plenty of stuff with childcare centres, but I guess you can apply the same strategy in that you want the DA to be as flexible as possible because, as you know, schools usually expand, they grow. They want to be able to accommodate, in the future that you don't want to have to lodge a DA every couple of years to ask for more car parking. So you want to be able to accommodate that. And really, if you've got a solid and a reputable traffic consultant on your team, it can help you with that. That's who I'll be relying on if I was you. They can manage not just the parking internally, but the traffic flows in and out of the site and around. Because the neighbours are going to complain, obviously, if there's a shortage of parking on site. But you can be creative. You've got public transport nearby, probably. People, staff might walk or ride a bike. Who knows? That's a good question, Sam.
Yeah, thanks so much. Just the last question. In your experience, which councils are the more difficult ones to deal with, if that's something that...
Listen, Sam, I'm recording this, but I said at the beginning, I'm not bashing councils here. I think between you and me, don't tell anybody, all councils are bloody difficult.
Right. There's
not one particular council. Sorry, I can't name one. There are certainly some good councils to work with, but overall, they're all terrible. And it's not a fault on the individual people working there. It's a systemic problem.
Thanks a lot.
We've got Mr. Ian Lacey here, who's been talking 42 days. For those that don't know, Ian Lacey is a planning solicitor. And if you were to ever see his car drive around Sydney, his number plate is 42 days. He's been chatting in the chat channel here. Were there any other questions?
I got a last question, Eddie.
Sure.
So for example, the issue of the density, do you think if we go to the court, the council will give up?
Yeah, we can talk offline, Yi, but if you go to court, it's something I probably should have mentioned. When you go to court, often you have to sacrifice something. So you might lose a townhouse because you can't go into court assuming whatever you've submitted with council is going to get approved in that fashion, in that design. So if you have a DA for 10 townhouses, you might be left with 9 after going to court.
Because we comply everything, comply the DA.
We can talk offline. It's a good question. It bothers me too. I've had projects too which comply, but council wants you to squeeze it here, squeeze it there for whatever reason. It's unfair, but at the same time, yeah, you just have to deal with it. But going to court might be a strategy we can talk about later.
Okay.
And we've got Mr. Ian Lacey, a planning solicitor, on this webinar too, who might be able to assist. James Ghaffari, do you want to join in?
Hey, how you going?
Good, how are you?
Good. I got a question to ask you. You said if you have trouble with council and you can't get a hold of them, what you can do is lodge a formal complaint.
Yep.
Now, if you lodge a formal complaint, does that get you in the bad books with council? Does that cause problems down the line with getting your DA assessed and addressed?
What do you think?
Well, I think it does. It's like
it
anything.
Would. Sure, but that's why I was suggesting if you're a consultant or builder, developer, engineer, let the client do it. If it's an individual property owner or a mum and dad, let them send the complaints. It's in their name and not yours. The council officers will still be pissed off, but sometimes, you know, I didn't share this before, but I once had a DA held up in a particular council, and we were waiting, very simple DA. We were waiting for, I think, 2 or 3 weeks for the actual consent. So, you know, to stamp, electronic stamp, not a real stamp. It's a half an hour job. I actually went to the council chambers myself, and I said to the council officer, I'm waiting here until I get that DA approval in my hand.
Wow.
I waited about an hour. So some things you have to just push, but, you know, I still have projects in that council. There's not a problem there. But yes, sometimes you have to put in a complaint, because that's the only way to talk, sometimes to get a decision.
Yep. So your advice is pretty much distance yourself as much as you can, let the client jump in.
Just like councillors, don't talk to councillors, leave that up to your clients to do. Because your next DA might be in the same council, you'll get the same town planner. What are you going to do then? Lodge another complaint?
Yeah. Thank you very much.
No problem. Thanks for listening. We've got someone else has put their hand up. Oh, we've got Danny Bro here. Hey, Danny. Nice to see you. Someone else put their hand up. Just unmute whoever you are. Joshua.
Yes.
Oyeku.
So I just want a question on behalf of a client.
Sure.
He's got a deferred commencement from the council, and that's because he requires an easement from a neighbor for stormwater. Now, the neighbor initially agreed to allow for that easement orally, not written. And then when the notification came out and they've done all the works, and then he decided he doesn't want to give the easement anymore. And the client has, paid for a lawyer on his behalf and tried to get him to give his reasons why, paid for another engineer on his behalf to assess the issue. And can't okay with it. Now it's about to go to court, and the question is, if from your experience, what's the possibility that the client will be able to succeed with having this easement?
It's that situation has happened to one of my clients before. Hasn't gone to court, but we managed to do something differently. I actually haven't had experience in court over easements, luckily. I don't know the prospects in court, but what I do hear is it's quite high. It's unfortunate. It's led to that point. We had a project where, also neighbour refused the easement. We did a different stormwater system, pumped it up to the street or whatever, and council approved that. It's hard. As I say to my clients, you can't choose your neighbours.
Yeah, and the sad thing was the neighbor agreed at first.
It happened to my client also. My client even paid the neighbor's legal fees, no joke. The next day, they sent an email, sorry, we don't want the easement anymore. What do you do? I might, listen, because I know we've gone over time, but there's still quite a few here. I might answer one more question, and we can do this again if you want. I think this was good. This was fun. So I'll just answer one more question. You just want to unmute yourself and fire away. From Alf. Oh, yes, again, please. We should do it again. Yeah, this was fun. Thank you very much, Alan. No problem, Alan. Nice to see you. Listen, guys, if there's no more questions, that's cool. Thank you for taking your time to be here today. As I said at the beginning, we probably should have done, I probably should have admit I should have done this a while ago. I've been putting it off. But let's keep the dialogue going. Again, I'll stress to you, if you want to make change to help this system speed up things, talk to your local councillors. If you're a member of the Architects Institute or Engineers Institute, whatever it's called, talk to them, because I think that's the only way we can make a real change and speed things up for our clients. Thank you, Linda. And we'll call it there, guys. Thank you so much for joining. Enjoy the rest of your day. It's bright and sunny. I'm going to get some fresh air myself. And we'll see you next time. Keep in touch. Thank you.